The children of Israel had had a most remarkable victory at Jericho. The walls fell down flat, and they were able just to walk straight in. But God's instructions were to destroy all the people and all the goods, except for the gold and silver, bronze and iron, which were to be saved and brought to the treasury of the Lord. But Achan had seen a beautiful Babylonian garment, a priestly robe, and found some gold and silver, which he took to himself and hid in his tent. The Israelites were on such a high that they then looked to the next battle, Ai, and sent 3,000 men to defeat Ai, a small town. But the men of Ai resisted and killed 36 of the Israelites. Joshua was distraught. The Lord had withdrawn his hand. They were being defeated. He consults the Lord, and the Lord said, "It's because you've sinned." And they identify Achan as the culprit. Once Achan had been stoned by the people, and Achan built up, then they're ready to pursue the task of occupying the land. Joshua chapter 8. Now the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed. Take all the people of war with you, and arise, go up to Ai. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. And you shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king. Only its spoil and its cattle you shall take as booty for yourselves. Lay an ambush for the city behind it." So Joshua arose and all the people of war to go up against Ai, and Joshua chose 30,000 mighty men of valour, and sent them away by night. And he commanded them, saying, "Behold, you shall lie in ambush against the city, behind the city. Do not go very far from the city, but all of you be ready. Then I and all the people who are with me will approach the city, and it will come about, when they come out against us as at the first, that we shall flee before them. For they will come out after us till we have drawn them from the city. For they will say, They are fleeing before us as at the first. Therefore we will flee before them. Then you shall rise from the ambush and seize the city, for the Lord your God will deliver it into your hand. And it will be, when you have taken the city, that you shall set the city on fire. According to the commandment of the Lord you shall do. See, I have commanded you." Joshua therefore sent them out, and they went to lie in ambush, and stayed between Bethel and Ai, on the west side of Ai. But Joshua lodged that night among the people. Then Joshua rose up early in the morning and mustered the people, and went up, he and the elders of Israel, before the people to Ai. And all the people of war who were with him went up and drew near, and they came before the city and camped on the north side of Ai. Now a valley lay between them and Ai. So he took about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai, on the west side of the city. And when they had set the people, all the army was on the north of the city, and its rear guard on the west of the city. Joshua went that night into the midst of the valley. Now it happened, when the king of Ai saw it, that the men of the city hurried and rose early and went out against Israel to battle, he and all his people, at an appointed place before the plain. But he did not know that there was an ambush set against him behind the city. And Joshua and all Israel made as if they were beaten before them, and fled by the way of the wilderness. So all the people who were in Ai were called together to pursue them, and they pursued Joshua and were drawn away from the city. There was not a man left in Ai or Bethel who did not go out after Israel. So they left the city open and pursued Israel. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Stretch out the spear that is in your hand toward Ai, for I will give it into your hand." And Joshua stretched out the spear that was in his hand toward the city. So those in ambush arose quickly out of their place, and they ran as soon as he had stretched out his hand, and they entered the city and took it, and hurried to set the city on fire. And when the men of Ai looked behind them, they saw, and behold, the smoke of the city ascended to heaven. So they had no power to flee this way or that way. And the people who had fled to the wilderness turned back on the pursuers. Now when Joshua and all Israel saw that the ambush had taken the city, and that the smoke of the city ascended, they turned back and struck down the men of Ai. Then the others came out of the city against them, so they were caught in the midst of Israel, some on this side and some on that side, and they struck them down, so that they let none of them remain or escape. But the king of Ai they took alive, and brought him to Joshua. And it came to pass, when Israel had made an end of slaying all the inhabitants of Ai in the field, in the wilderness where they pursued them, and when they had all fallen by the edge of the sword until they were consumed, that all the Israelites returned to Ai and struck it with the edge of the sword. So it was that all who fell that day, both men and women, were 12,000, all of the people of Ai. For Joshua did not draw back his hand, with which he stretched out his spear, until he had utterly destroyed all the inhabitants of Ai. Only the livestock and the spoil of that city Israel took as booty for themselves, according to the word of the Lord which he had commanded Joshua. So Joshua burned Ai, and made it a heap for ever, a desolation to this day. And the king of Ai he hanged on a tree until evening, and as soon as the sun was down, Joshua commanded that they should take his corpse down from the tree, cast it at the entrance of the gate of the city, and raise over it a great heap of stones that remains to this day. My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we've shared the victory over Ai. Scripture provides many examples of different approaches to things. Sometimes it takes just a few people to win a great victory, but this time the Lord required the whole people. The first time against Ai they'd sent 3,000 men. This time they used 30,000 men. And we learn at the end that 12,000 were killed in Ai. That's both men and women. Again, the reason for judgment is that these people had turned away from the Lord. They'd all known the Lord after the flood, but in the 800 years since the flood, the people of the land of Canaan had turned away from the Lord to worship false gods, and the Lord was claiming this territory back for himself as a bridgehead from which to reach out to the whole world. But God's people were to be holy, and so they were to destroy every remnant of evil. But this time they were allowed to keep the livestock and some of the goods as booty for themselves. But the city itself was destroyed, and we're reminded that at the time of writing you could go and visit the ruins of Ai and see the destruction that had taken place, God's judgment upon these people. But notice, the first time they attacked Ai, they had just sent spies and acted on their own initiative. This time the Lord has spoken to Joshua. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed. Take all the people of war with you, and arise, go up to Ai. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. And you shall do to Ai and its king, as you did to Jericho and its king. And the Lord also gave him the battle plan. Lay an ambush for the city behind it. And so Joshua did as the Lord commanded. He took all the people. He set up the ambush, and the Lord gave him the victory. In the first attack against Ai, the Israelites were overconfident, and they were defeated. In the second attack, the men of Ai were overconfident and were defeated.